Well, hello, everybody out there in webinar land. My name is David Burton. I'm the director of the Grace Hudson Museum, and my co-host tonight is Alyssa Bogue, our curator of education and exhibits, and who did a fantastic job curating the Art of Wonder exhibition. I just want to make a quick land acknowledgement. I want to acknowledge the original caretakers of the land we are on. The Grace Hudson Museum is in southern Mendocino County, and along with our neighboring counties, Lake County and Sonoma County, really comprise the traditional homelands of the various Pomo peoples. And so at the Grace Hudson Museum, we strive to honor this land by bringing truth and nuance to the stories we tell, both native and non-native. And we want to encourage you from wherever you're listening to get to know the indigenous peoples in your area, get to know their histories, their cultures, and their art. So we encourage you to do that wherever you are. Our panelists tonight are Antoinette von Grone, based in Boonville in Anderson Valley, Jazzminh Moore, based in Willits. She also is on the faculty of studio art at Mendocino College and is the director of the Mendocino College Art Gallery. Micah Sanger is with us. He's based in the town of Mendocino, and he also oversees Visionary Arts Gallery, which you can find in downtown Mendocino. And lastly, but not leastly, Red Wolf, another one of our artists in the Art of Wonder exhibition, and he's based in Potter Valley. All right, panelists. We're going to kick off with a question that we'd like each of you to answer. And if each of you could take 5 or so minutes to share a little something about yourself, where you are from, how did you first become interested in art? And Red Wolf, I'm seeing you at the top of the screen, so why don't you start us off?
Okay. I grew up in Florida. Moved around a lot as a kid. Well, actually, I hadn't thought about it this way, but I, as a kid, had trouble in school with spelling and understanding. Now we understand that people have dyslexia and it's a condition, but at that point, it was one of these things that just I'd marvel at. You're supposed to stand up and spell out the word, and I just was terrible at it. I just never excelled, but I could draw. And I can remember at some point, principal walking through our class and stopping and making some sort of stir with the teacher around something I'd been drawing. So I think it got a lot of reinforcement for that. Was a way that I could show that I had something in me. And so, the kind of simply, it leaves me with a feeling like I've been an artist. I've always been an artist. I was an artist as a child and always expected that this is what I was going to do. I went away from that. I was, like I said, growing up in Florida, I ended up going to the University of, I was starting to get into work with Jerry Oldsman at the University of Florida. Jerry Oldsman was a photographer, and this is pre-digital. So he was doing a lot of dark room magic where, we'd have a rock suspended over the ocean with a giant oak tree growing out of it. And I liked that kind of surrealistic stuff. And I wanted to go work with him, but I'd been enough of a goofball in high school that I couldn't go right into the university. I had to go into a community college there in Gainesville, in a college town. And it had turned out that there were humanistic educators there that had banded together and taken an old high school and made it into a community college. And it was an experiment in humanistic education. So there was no failure in any class. If you were making below a C, you were just withdrawing passing. The only required course was, I think, a trust fall. So it was very much the whole human potential movement in the early phases, So this is in the early 70s. So I got excited about that, and it changed the direction of what I thought I was going to do for a living. And so I came back to art years later out here in California, getting around some older artists that kind of mentored me back in. So I had always been an artist, thought I was always an artist as a child, got very excited about a humanistic education, and ended up working for the Esalen Institute for a while. And then came back to it in my probably late 20s, early 30s, and have been made the commitment. And this is what I do. This is how I make a living. I don't have another job. I'm all in.
All
So
right. Great. Jazzminh, how about you?
I was raised between the deep, deep in the woods in Oregon and the end of a dirt road in Southern California. So I was raised by hippies, and there was no television or radio. My mom was always studying and very quiet. And my dad was a visionary, building a retreat center, utopian universe of culture and consciousness. And so I had a little art studio under the stairs, and that was what I did. I could either be outside in the wilds of Oregon or San Diego, or I could be making art. I was really supported to be an artist. I was very quiet, and very shy in school. And the one thing that they could sort of identify that I was known for was all of my art since from kindergarten on. So I started getting accolades for art making. My dad really promoted me. He said, "You're an artist. Don't ever sell out. Don't ever work for Disney. Don't ever take the money. You do you. You follow your own vision." And my mom had gone to art school, actually. So when I was 5, she had taught me the proportions of a face and symmetry, as she had learned it in art school. She had dropped out and gone to run off in some hippie buses across the country and, land on an apple orchard in Washington. And long, circuitous adventure stories with both of my parents. And so yeah, I was promoted as an artist. My mom wanted me to go to the community college near her house so she could keep me safe. My dad said, "Go to the best art school you can in our region." So I ended up at Cornish College of the Arts in Seattle. At age 17, I had my own apartment and went to art school for 4 years. And I worked at music festivals. So I was always involved in the arts, as a young adult. And that's really it. I had 2 parents. My dad's a musician. My mom is a creative. And they both just fostered that in me.
All right. Micah, how about you? Oh, unmute yourself, Micah.
I love that story. That was beautiful. Yeah, I was raised around the dairy farms of Wisconsin. On my father's side, they were all dairy farmers from, they look like they just came off from Europe somewhere, but the farms were wonderful. They were like the smells of the barn and grandpa milking the cows and, giving a shot of milk to the little kittens sitting around, and we would play in the hay lofts, and then so it was a beautiful introduction into this world. And then about at the age of 6, we moved to Europe, and we lived in Bordeaux and Orleans. And I just have this photographic memory of going from these barns of Wisconsin to walking in the Vatican. And here's all these marble floors and gold leaf, everything, And I walked up to a Michelangelo's Moses. And in this stone are these veins chiseled so perfectly. And I remember as a little kid, I still have a photographic memory of seeing that. Unfortunately, my parents loved art and museums and cathedrals, and so we traveled all through Europe, and then we returned back to the United States about 3.5, 4 years later. But so it was a good introduction. But as through the school, elementary, junior high, and all that, I really disliked art because I would get frustrated that whatever I would try to do never captured what I wanted it to be. So I would just be a little depressed at the end of it. And it was like, so I turned away from art. And it wasn't until I was at Clemson University as an engineering major, and after quite a few semesters, I walked into an art studio class. And my God, here's people emotional, talking to each other. And they're sharing what they're working on, and they can do anything they want, you know. And it was like, wow, it's time to reinvestigate art. You know, this is freedom. So that's how I got, and since then everything's been pretty interesting. I'm done.
All right, thank you. And Antoinette.
Well, so there are some similarities and some complete differences. I grew up on a farm as well in Germany, and had a fabulous childhood, you know, running wild and, you know, only having to be home for dinner and lunch and whatever. And as of a very young age, I started drawing. And while not discouraging it, my parents made sure they would sit me down maybe once a year or so during dinner or, you know, lunch, whatever. And there would be a discussion that the one thing one could not become was an artist. And I ate that. I believed it. So it was never on my horizon. And so I grew up, I went to school, high school, didn't apply myself terribly, had a really, really good art teacher though. And you know, that was amazing because he taught me all the bases that I ever needed for later. And yeah, so I finished school, and I would have loved to study biology because, you know, when you see my paintings, I love animals, and I love everything about them and so forth. So, but biology was not in the cards because my score wasn't good enough to go to university with that. And so then the big question was, what now? And so I thought, you know, I don't have any special talents. I don't know what to do. Maybe, you know, I'm good at drawing and all that. Maybe I should learn how to restore old paintings. And that idea was welcomed in the family. And we had, by good fortune, a family friend who restored churches and paintings and things like that. And he knew me from this age. And he said, oh my God, no, you have way too much imagination. You're not going to do a nice restorative job. You're just going to freelance. And that's not for you. You need to go to design school. So my father said, design school? Well, how about industrial design? That sounded like money. It was all about them being totally afraid that I would end up on the streets, not making my livelihood. And so my mom and I went to the design school that was near us. And the professor who was receiving that day was from textile design. And she looked at my little portfolio and she said, industrial design? I don't think so. You're coming to me. And so by chance, I ended up in textile design. And that's a long story. You know, I ended up then later going to Paris and doing a private school in high fashion. And then I did an apprenticeship in window decoration with Hermès in Paris, and on it goes, all the way through finding the technique of silk painting, which allowed me to combine everything that I had learned and become a freelance artist. And there you have it. And that's what I did. And that's what I've been doing since 1982, one. So that's the story.
That's great. I'll stick with you, Antoinette, for the second question. Have there been any specific artists or movements or styles that have influenced your work?
Yeah, I would say, in general, I like to look at different art, but in the early days, I definitely had a affinity to Henry Rousseau, who was kind of a primitive, naive painter. And I have a painting that I did that might kind of illustrate that. So I don't know, let me see if I can share my screen. And there it is. Share. So you can see it's, it's a little, primitive. It's a wonderland. It's nature, all of that. So then the other person that, let's take that out of that, stop share. The other person that eventually really influenced me in my technique was Van Gogh. I had gone to 2 exhibits of his in Europe in the span of 3 months, and I saw maybe 500 exposition pieces. And I came home and I was destroyed. I said, there is no sense for me to paint anymore. Everything has been said and done. This guy was all of a sudden, it was just, wow. I had never really looked into him, but having been exposed to that many pieces was just amazing. And what happened then, I had a canvas that was, primed and had a wash on it. And I kept walking by it, and all of a sudden I saw this wild landscape, and I call it landscape of emotion. And I did it in the technique of Van Gogh. And there you can see it. And it's all these, fine structured strokes. And it helped me to get over that hurdle for, oh my God, I can't do anything anymore. And I use this technique maybe once or twice a year to loosen up, because otherwise I'm, very detailed and so forth. So, but this has been a gift to me for sure.
Do you think about either of those artists today when you work?
I'm working currently on a painting that's in, in that stroke style. So yes, but not so much Rousseau anymore. It's, I've developed my own style. So yeah, but I still look at, the old painters for sure.
That's for sure. Red Wolf, how about you? Any artists, movement, styles that influenced you? Unmute.
There, trying to click on the wrong place. Less so. It's funny because I feel like as an artist, I should be able to name a number of different artists that have influenced me, and it's not so easy. I would say the not the surrealist painters as much. Like I said, where I started, I wanted to go work with Jerry Olsman. That imaginative juxtaposition of different elements in a photographic format, that was exciting to me. And I actually never made it to the university there. Ended up coming out here. I have kind of more recently latched on to the art and space movement, the California art and space movement, but more rather than for the look of their style, really kind of their background. These guys were this was a group of artists in Southern California, influenced by JPL in material science. So all this ability to cast fiberglass in vacuum molds and all these things that JPL exposed them to kind of created a whole movement. And I feel some akin to that in a different way. I mean, I'm mixing different kinds of mediums. I'm working on a honeycomb aluminum panel. The manufacturer that first created that honeycomb structure was Hexcel here in the Bay Area. And Hexcel was doing this for, this what you build satellites out of, any place where you want something very rigid and very lightweight. You sandwich these kind of use them. If you pull these two sheets apart, the inside of it is like a aluminum foil in a honeycomb configuration. But the way they're all sandwiched together and glued together, they're very, very strong. So I randomly met the guy that used to run the division for Hexcel, the whole division there, and he had his own shop in Oakland, and started handing me panels. Actually, he started giving me panels, and years later I said, why did you start giving these things to me? And apparently he was working for Hexcel when Frank Stella was using that metal. Frank Stella would come in and buy honeycomb, and you can go back historically and find all these honeycomb sculptures from that period in Stella's career. So, I was just like that, the material science kind of connection. And I've worked at it in a number of other ways. There's a contemporary artist that I think I would say influenced me. I was in and out of several little galleries in San Francisco years ago, and always watch this guy named Andreas Nonenbaum. Andreas also works on metal, but he was the first person I'd seen that figured out there's some optical effects here with basically convex concave scoring in the metal that creates this almost a 3-inch or so dimensional effect. And I'd never seen that anywhere worldwide. I mean, still, there's several people now kind of copying on the fundamental stuff that Andreas does. Because we actually in a gallery in Gary Street at the same time. I've never wanted to do what he did, but I really liked what he had been figuring out optically. And so I've kind of found my own way that pretty much has been influenced by Andreas. Other than that, I can't really name a movement or something that I could really hang my hat on. I would say in my lifetime, maybe Andreas, because I could look at it and I knew him and I didn't want to do what he was doing, but it did spur me in a direction that is pretty primary to what I do now.
Yeah, I want to say, I think listening to Antoinette and Red Wolf, it just sort of highlights the diversity of artists we have in the Art of Wonder exhibition and the different paths one takes to a life in art.
Yeah.
Jazzminh, how about you? Can you speak to influences and?
Sure. I came from a figurative background. Part of the accolades I got as a kid, as a teenager, was how well I could draw people. So I went through and had a figurative art career, let's say. But the work that is in the Grace Hudson, I'll share my screen. This piece is really influenced by Cornelia Parker. I don't know if you know this British conceptual artist. Let me share this one. Let's see. This piece is one of my favorite works of art of all time. It's called Cold Dark Matter, An Exploded View. Wow. And Cornelia Parker is a conceptual artist, British artist. She had the British Army explode a garden shed, and then she suspended all of the fragments with a single light source in the center. And I love it. I love it. I, as a figurative painter, I always reference Cornelia Parker when I'm asked, who is your favorite artist? Cornelia Parker, by far. And so I never had I never gave myself the freedom to really go all the way into that kind of tactile world. but you can see the reference. You can see sort of I don't know, you can see some inspiration from that in this ship painting. You can see the explosion and the force of nature of these wings. So, then the geometry of that work. And then I also shamelessly stole the waves, the light in those waves from these 19th century Russian painters. So I'm going to share that too. You can see, you can see where my influence came from. So I don't know if you can see that one, but yeah. So for me, I would say Rembrandt and Cornelia Parker are the two that really inspire me. And then I will glean and appropriate from all corners of the art world and all of art history to get where I want to go.
And of course, you've got that last painting you were showing us was a boat on very rough seas.
Yes.
Jazzminh, I want to ask you, this isn't really represented in the Art of Wonder, but I know you've done a lot of paintings on wood. Can you talk just for a second about what attracted you to that and what you like about that?
Sure. This is my website. You can see many, 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 many paintings on wood. I love the quality of the surface, the fact that there's already a composition that I can work into in these panels. I would find irregular panels out of the dump store in the hardware store, pull those out. So I'd get the gnarliest panel I could find and use that texture as part of the composition.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, this one really illustrates what the wood means to me. The wood is the body, the wood is the skin, and it's alive. It's a once alive, it's a part of the tree. It's the skin of the tree. It's the flesh of the tree. Like I said at the beginning, I'm from deep in nature. I'm from the middle of the woods in Oregon. I was born there. I wasn't born in a hospital. I was born in a cabin in the middle of the woods. And so where there's a rushing river, there wasn't a refrigerator. Our milk was in the river. Like it was back in time growing up in the summers there. And so I'm deeply connected to nature. And however, I've lived in giant cities my entire adult life. It started with Seattle. I moved to San Francisco. I lived in Long Beach for graduate school. I lived in New York City for 7 years. And even while in the city, this body of work that I'm sharing now is from the last show before I moved out of New York. And you can see I was really deeply trying to reroute into nature. I had the panel created by a craftsperson, and I had him cut it a little bit longer here. And then I took pliers and distressed the surface to create this organic edge. And it was me just trying to really dive back into the ground after living in the concrete for so many years. I was kind of freaking out. I was looking for this tangle of vines. And so the wood really represents nature for me. Now that I'm back in nature, I'm no longer painting on wood. So maybe I got there finally.
Intimate relationship with the materials you use to create art. And Micah, how about you in terms of influences in your artistic career?
Oh, I was very fortunate when I ended up at the University of Santa Barbara that I had an art professor who really understood Cezanne and his manipulation of planes. So the focus was on the picture plane, to orchestrate the same energies that we're feeling in a landscape or from a human face, and distort the planes of, let's say, the face like the one thing that I worked on in the class was a skull. So I took a skull, and there's, when objects are in front of us, we feel a certain energy or pressure from them, and that's what Cezanne was so good about, was whether it was a mountain or what, a spoon or whatever it was to feel these sensations and being able to duplicate them by manipulating the planes on the picture plane that he's painting on, to recreate those very sensations. And I remember one person said, I read about it, that Cezanne's painting didn't look like the place, but it felt like the place.
Mm.
And so that class taught me how to adjust planes and recreate these sensations. But what's really strange about it is it's subconscious. So I would do a portrait and manipulate the planes of the face, tilt them out and expand them up, just how they would feel, the way they felt as I was drawing the person. I would sit up real close, maybe about, I'd be about maybe 18 inches away from them, to feel these sensations and create all these distortions. And in the class, it was stressed to do these distortions, but then make it to where nobody knows you're doing it. And so it has an effect. Like when you look at a drawing, you can't so easily like go around it. You know, it's like you're hitting something profound on the picture plane, and it engages the awareness in a deeper way. So I love that. You know, it was like kind of instinctive intelligence, you know, and the fact that nobody had to know what you were doing, you know, was really kind of wonderful. So anyway, Cezanne was one. I love the colors of Gauguin. He really touched something very deep. And it wasn't until I was at Chico University in the art section where they had this book opened up on this table. Little did I know it was going to change my art direction in many ways. But it was a book of Japanese brush masters, you know, and they're doing the Buddha's walking stick and the Buddha's circle, you know, with the big brushes, you know. And in the book, they would take these photographs before the master awakened and after the master awakened. And they would magnify it hundreds or thousands of times, I can't remember, to where you would actually see the individual ink particles on the page. And what was astounding is they were like humming. After they awoke, there was like all this chi energy was just like emanating from all the particles. And so that one experience of looking at that book that day, it took me for a whole year. That's all I did was abstracts, these big abstracts. I mean, they were big. And then so it was a wonderful exploration into that. And then when I went to New York City and saw a retrospective of Rothko's, it just kind of tied that onto a whole deeper level of, you know, you're standing in front of these paintings and your hair blows back, you know, because they're just humming with energy, you know. So it was like, oh wow. So I in my work I have abstracts and then I have realistic, you know, because they do a beautiful dance together. I mean, everything's energy anyway, whether it's a landscape or whatever it is.
Micah,
Anyway,
I know in the exhibition we talk about um, the influence of, I think it's the Adoration of the Magi.
oh yeah, Leonardo.
The sketch. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, that was that's a beautiful beautiful piece of work, boy. And whether he was intentionally creating that, it's what it communicated to me was, I don't know if I can find it. Alyssa, is there any way that you could bring it up at all?
I'll take a quick look for it, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, it was the background for one of his bigger paintings, and when I saw it, it was astounding that, as simple as it is, it's just a cartoon for one of his paintings of the background. And right away I saw how he was able to for me, he was able to capture a sense of a multi-dimensional reality. And, encompassing the forms of space-time, and yet hinting at this mystery of form. It's energy. Form is consciousness. And I go, oh my God, you can actually paint consciousness, and a multi-dimensional world we live in, and it was, I got so excited. So that's it.
Well, that was also a study that really was dealing with perspective and
Yeah.
vanishing points and whatnot, but explicitly revealed to the mind of the viewer.
Yeah, yeah. It was beautiful.
Mm.
I don't know if that was his intention, but boy, it sure rocked my world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on, I'd like to ask each of you how your art has evolved over time. Antoinette, you want to start us off with that? Oh, unmute yourself.
I think principally it has evolved, by technique and, what you can do with each of them. So I have a screen share here with my silk paintings. For instance, those were large scarves that I did. There's always, I always like the little bit of humor in it and all that. And that really translates all the way to today. Then after that, when I left silk painting because somebody laughed into my face about the prices, I went into wall paintings. So here is a mural. It's the Lemurlu. And, I did that for quite a while. And so I worked with watercolors and started using them in paintings until I decided that, I was looking for longevity more and started painting in oils. And in the meantime, I also did a little bit of, let's see, yes, I, tiles, any technique was, had some interest. And, I was always just interested in seeing if I could conquer the beast somehow. And but eventually, I just landed on, oil paintings such as this here. So, yeah, that's really what I can tell you about developing. I just have different styles because I don't like to get bored. So I switch around between subject matters, basically, all the way to somewhat abstract. Yeah, that's it.
I'm wondering, because the paintings of yours in the Art of Wonder are from what you call your Animal Ancestors series. Can you talk a little more about what that means, Animal Ancestors?
Yeah, it started with my missing my ancestors on the walls. I grew up with my ancestors on the walls, and I kind of, the transition from Germany to America was, slow. And so I was missing this little bit of tradition, and I thought, well, maybe I could, paint my own ancestors. And then I thought, that's not interesting. If I had to choose my ancestors, I would choose animals. And that's how it all started. And, I love them. again, I sometimes I just do strictly animal ancestors with a little bit of humor. Other times I do animal ancestors with a sense of where they belong. So I will dress up one animal, and then I put all the other animals that are from that region or something around it. And that has a little bit of a, yeah, teaching point if you want. Yeah, so those are the animal ancestors.
Right. You know, Red Wolf, it occurs to me that maybe the evolution in your art really has to do with experimenting with materials and substrates and grinding tools and films. And could you talk to us about that journey that you've taken?
Well, I don't have the clean screen sharing thing. I'm going to show you my desktop, and then I'll give you. I grabbed a couple examples. Okay, wait a minute. First, I've got to share. Bear with me here where we get this. And oh, that's interesting. So when I share my, you guys don't show up here. So old samples. Let me switch. This cute gallery is what I want to do. And then let me blow this up, and that'll make it give you something to look at. So I actually used to work much more, realistically, and these kind of things. I was learning to paint at this point, so these kind of things were taking way too long to make a living at this, and so I began to kind of open up my style. Actually, the material came in about the same time. I started trying to loosen up my style, and then I was with a group of people that we had people that had come over from Europe in the summer and stay with us. And there was a guy that was a dental surgeon from Munich that he started bringing, after a couple of years, he started fixing people's teeth here. So he would bring over these UV cure resins before it hit the United States. And so I started finding epoxies, and so started working with epoxies. And something like this is actually on board. And the problem with this is if you do something here in California in the summertime, we got maybe 30% humidity. If you mail this to some other part of the country, if you send this to Miami, Florida, it's going to come off the plane into 99% humidity. And even what seems to be pretty stable wood substrate is going to want to twist and turn. And then the epoxies have a tendency, at least those early, I ended up working with whatever I could find, and they were company. In hindsight, now I know more about who I was dealing with. They buy in bulk and they mix things together. And if there's a little more shrinkage than what was intended, that was kind of their way of doing business. Which means that I'd have things that over time they'd want to keep cross-linking and warping the substrate. So that's why I ended up going to the honeycomb aluminum. So I went to this kind of loose planets in space, and then eventually, introducing other elements into it. So that's kind of historically what I did. Go back and do that again. And then so I was able to bring in some of the figurative aspects. And also it's very loose, abstract kind of way. This is actually a little early, a little later in the, well, I'll just flip through these. There comes a point where that sphere above the figure, it was a large 32-inch hologram. I was doing shows, and I had a guy that would come up every year and end up buying a little work from me. But at some point we talked, and I was looking at a need for some CNC, experiment with CNC equipment. And he began to reveal that he had this equipment, and he had built himself a cave and bought a $50,000 laser and was able to do very large DCG holograms. So that's basically where you're mixing this dichromatic gel or salts into a gel, pouring it onto a sheet of glass. Once that's cured, setting up whatever you array under it. When you flip a laser beam on, where the single file photons hit the glass and bounce off of whatever you've arrayed underneath it, where those two photons hit, they heat up the chromium, and that hardens that one little nano particle of the gel. When you wash the rest of it out, what you have with the holography is nanostructures that are standing up on the glass that, depending on how far apart they are from each other, will give you different colors of the spectrum. So this just so we collaborated, and unfortunately he died during the COVID years, but we got very involved in sharing information and collaborating, and it really kind of changed the direction where this is post, Tom has died. These are diffraction gradients, but this is commercially things that you can buy that I'm modifying to be able to, that's a little different story. Again, figurative work on aluminum, but this ability to manipulate these nanostructures to create color structurally, like a beetle shell or hummingbird feathers, these are all little nanoparticles that are diffracting light. And my interest right now is how can I bring these in to this painting context and start introducing at least some elements of how I build an image being made via these, kind of diffractive characteristics. So these are kind of current examples. People were talking about things that were personal. I had osteomyelitis 7 years ago, or maybe more now. And this was a piece, actually I just had done a large job, and this was a scrap where what I needed had gotten cut out of this. And this was just, very much the post-COVID or osteomyelitis. Basically, I could have died. It was a bacteria was eating away my spine. And to treat it, they caught it early enough that it was a little fanny pack, 24 hours a day pumping antibiotics. And so you really get to a point where who's going to die, the bacteria or you? And then, once the bacteria is gone, it's a long road to get back together. So this was just something, picked it up and did this one day. And it's in hindsight, I would say that pretty much expresses what I was going through at the time. So this is one of those. Let me take you back out of sharing.
Great. It occurred to me, Jazzminh, in when you were answering your last question, you talked a lot about an evolution in your artwork. Is there anything more you want to say about that?
I think I've gone from being very serious as a young person, like I had to be as good as Rembrandt. I had to be the best. I had to work that hard. And I've gone from that kind of determination to lightening up. So to where last week, so I'll share, let's see if I can do this. So this would be an example of I did a self-portrait series. This is me at 17 years old, and it's my first oil painting. And I'm, I worked and worked until the surface was beyond worked. And then here's one from 25 where I've moved to Southern California. Let me see here. And my palette lightens up. I moved from the dark Seattle back to California. And you can see, the expressions lightened up, the palettes lightened up. I'm using more subjective color. I'm allowing myself a little bit more freedom. And then this is something I made the other day, last Friday. This is just a fun sketch. I produce a little pop-up gallery at the Lot on Main, downtown Ukiah, for the First Friday Art Walk. And I draw there, and it's so fun because I'm free. For once in my life, I get to just do what I want, which is to sit there and play with highlighters and Sharpies and not really care. And there's live music and there's dogs running around and there's kids running around and artisans selling all sorts of craft wares and vintage clothing and flowers. It's just a whole scene. It's like a community square. So, to go from that serious must end up at the quality of Rembrandt to let's have a little fun and play with highlighters, for me is kind of my evolution in a nutshell.
All right. Boy, time is flying by, and I know we're not going to get to all the questions that we initially intended to, but I have to ask you this. Can you describe any times or moments in your life when you've experienced wonder and what kind of impact that had on you? And has wonder played a role or inspired you in your artwork? Who wants to go first? All right, Mike, I'm going to start with you. Unmute yourself.
Okay. I'd say all my art has to do with wonder. It's an extraordinary experience to be alive in time space, and its unfathomable nature. It just gets even more mysterious the more awake we get. But the first experience that really started to change things was I was out landscape painting in New Mexico and just doing realistic stuff and this voice I heard this thought came through that said, imagine nothingness. And so it was such a clear, different kind of thought, it was like, so I actually had to stop. And I closed my eyes, put my brushes down, closed my eyes, and sunk into this deep, dark stillness. It was so calm, peaceful, and deep, And then after a few moments, I opened up my eyes, and I was startled at the how much more alive the landscape looked by contrast. I mean, everything was just emanating like 100 more times than I was previously looking at it when I'm painting. Suddenly it was like, holy cow, what is this world? It's like looking, like just landing in a new world, full of energy and life, just beaming out of everything. So I started painting again, and what was really interesting about that was that sense of the contrast between the nothingness and the nowness of the living moment that I was experiencing with my brushes in hand. That contrast lingered around as a backdrop. So something was always able to kind of feel the mystery of this world while I was painting. And what was really beautiful about that was over the weeks, that sense of this, and it created this sense of like another dimension behind this one that we're in. And the feeling this kind of the multidimensional nature of our experience created this sense of wonder. Like, what is this? And what is this dimension we live in? And it just gets, and that motivates my art. Is like now when I go out at the ocean and I see the scene there, it's like, well, what is form? What is this life? And being able to express forms, but within this context of this larger reality of that, that contrast between the void or another dimension, the bigger dimension behind space-time. To feel these two worlds simultaneously is like, it just creates this enthusiasm to try to paint it. It's just so much fun. I'm done.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly something that very much attracted Alyssa and I to your work, is the notion of the connectivity in the universe. You know, light, particles, the things that on an everyday basis we never think about because we're busy living our lives. But you managed to articulate that really well in your art.
Thank you.
Oh, Antoinette, how about you? Wonder. What role
Wonder,
has that played in your life?
wonder. Uh, as I told you, I love biology. I love maybe looking deeper into things, or trying to, when I look at them, to really understand them. And so that's, I guess, the closest that I'm coming to this wonder. But I want to understand it. I want to see how things come together. And I have a screen to share, which is kind of maybe a weird thing. So here, two completely different things. On the left side of my screen is water. And so I painted water, and it was excruciating. But I wanted to see if I could come anywhere near what nature is providing. And of course, no, I wasn't able to do that. But I did a rendition of it. And then on the other side is a travel painting, which, anytime I go on a trip into anything exotic or so, I come with my camera equipment. I don't paint, I just take a ton of photos, and then I come back and I ask myself, so what would it look like if I could put all my impressions into one painting? How can I best express this amazing feeling that I had, in this particular place? And the image here is from Mongolia, and that peacefulness in the distance, the colors, the eagle hunter, the animals that are not afraid of humans. They're just intermingling, and I just try to capture that. And yeah, so that's my feeling of amazement or wonder, or however you want to call that.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Red Wolf, how about you?
There. Yeah, it's funny, none of us jumped out to want to talk about this, and yet it is fundamental, I think, to each of our different styles. I've followed different been around different gurus that had, some ability to transmit Shaktipa, where you have a whole room full of people going through automatic body movements or whatever. And, later to find, that guy has had problems, sexual, all the stuff that happened in our generation, where one group after another. I gotta say that I had an experience in so I've kind of built my life looking for how do you reach beyond our daily life in that direction of wonder. And I did have an experience with and again, this is going to sound exotic. It was an Earth Sun dance. Basically, it was 3 days of dancing, no food, water, in this case, to a tree. So unlike a lot of the sun dance with piercing and everything, this was none of that. There was no kind of sacrificing of yourself, but it was get into a prayerful place and work to connect yourself with life, with Earth. And there was a point where the tree literally was, just kind of, it's at the moment that I noticed it, I realized I'm in a whole very different place. But basically, coming off that tree, like you would see rays of light, but these were like large green emanations coming from that tree, surrounding everything, surrounding me. And I've had a lot of different experiences in my life, but I'd say that was the most profound sense of wonder and connection that I ever had. So I think that nothing in my work is overtly spiritual or religious, but it's very much fundamentally what I try to orient my life towards in some ways. And hey, man, I live here in Potter Valley, and we do, what did they say? Put your pants on one leg at a time. There's nothing unusual about what I do, but I think fundamentally there's an orientation to say, I'm going to try to do the best I can in this life, and I'm going to move towards wonder. And so there's a little of that in I try to have a little of that in everything I do. And so I think that experience is probably the strongest, it stayed with me, expression of wonder that kind of answers the question.
Yeah. I think certainly the kind of work you do as well, Red, makes people wonder how you do what you do.
Yeah, there you go.
The materials you use and all of that.
Yeah. I just know myself, if I walk a show and I think watercolor, I know what the part of my brain wants to label everything. Oh, tree, tree, trunk brown, leaves green, very simplistic. And that kind of moves into seeing artwork too. And so I do like where I look at something and I don't know how it's done. It seems to demand my attention, and so it has become kind of a sub part of how I create artwork. I like it to imply that there's something more than you can know that you understand.
Yeah. Well, I think you've definitely have succeeded in that. Jazzminh, how about you? What's your connection with wonder or inspiration from wonder, if any?
The first maybe simple inspiration is watching my daughter, who's 10 years old now, learn something new, and her whole face goes, oh, and that is the simplest expression of wonder. And it's really going from nothing to something. It's this big aha moment. And so similar to Red Wolf, I appreciate works that give me that aha moment. There's one artist in particular named Jeff Sondhaus. He's this fantastic painter, and he actually uses matchsticks. When I realized that he uses matchsticks for the hair and then lights them all on fire, and then that smoke is part of the texture, I had a wonder moment. So let me see if I can go back. I'm not that good at sharing these things. So Jeff Sondhaus is an artist who always inspires wonder every single time. There's this one piece, let me scroll down. There's also that juxtaposition of the business suit with the flaming afro with this color grid. There's incongruous textures and patterns. This is one of my favorite pieces because the afros actually burned through the substrate here, and that ends up creating part of the texture, and it looks like it burned out the we in God We Trust. So again, something that I didn't know how it was made. I would never expect to see that. I love it. That's one kind of simple example of wonder. And the other one is the peak experience. I'm walking on the beach with my daughter. It's already the golden hour. We're in Southern California. And then we start singing together and we're harmonizing. And I don't think the day can get any better. And the light gets more and more drenched in golden late afternoon sun. And I'm having this peak experience connecting with my daughter. And then all of a sudden, dolphins start leaping out of the water in front of the sunset, and it's just like incredible on top of incredible on top of incredible, and I have this like bursting sense of joie de vivre. So that would be my large scale wonder, and then my simple is, you know, a new thing.
That's fantastic. Right. One of the artists in the exhibition, Stephen Lee Carlson, who was a longtime friend of mine, his day was not really complete until he watched a sunset, and he would try to get either on a beach or up on the mountains, and it's that mystery of that the sun going down. He was always on the lookout for St. Elmo's fire, the little green flicker before the sun goes down. So, well, I'm gonna see. I don't see any questions coming from our audience. So I'll give everybody in the audience one chance to ask a question or make a comment. And if not, I think we'll move towards wrapping up our evening. Okay.
Oh,
Oh, we got something here.
go ahead, Roberta.
Hang on a second. I think
David, I hopefully I gave her permission to
Oh.
talk. There you go, Roberta.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
yes, go ahead.
Hi, it's really nice to meet and talk to you all since I've been writing about you all, and I got really fascinated. I could ask all of you questions, but what really interested me, I wanted to ask Red Wolf, since you've been working in a different medium where you're not using physical pigments anymore to create color. Is that right?
Well, to a degree, I am, you know, some of the holographic things, and I've got some thin films that you know mimic, create color, kind of like soap bubbles, create color. But I'm still, you know, I'll go and increase contrast with some shading and with blacks and all, and when I'm using these thin films, and then inevitably, you know, almost everything has maybe a little bit of pigment. It's just trying to go from, you know, 100% creating an image via pigment to how much of it can I do around these, the way light is diffracted or the way these films or structures will create different colors. So it's not I haven't figured out how to do it without using pigment at all, but I'm just trying to see how much I can build an image without going to paint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's a whole new concept for me. It's not that I want people to stop using pigment, but it's so fascinating, you know.
I know, for me too. I mean, that's one of the parts that I love about it. I mean, you know, you can't put a line on a page that hasn't been done billions of times over. If you consider, you know, 30, 40, 50,000 years ago, caves of Lascaux to, you know, cave paintings to today, we just redo these things. But like I said, the whole ability, like when I was working with the holographer, that really opened my eyes to the fact that, you know, we're creating depth and color and this whole movement and image in the image, and that's never ever been possible in all of human history until right now in our lifetime. So, you know, whether that diffraction gradient stuff looks pretty guarded, you know, garish, and, you know, it looks like your toothpaste wrapper, you know, how do you figure out how to integrate it and make it lay down and become part of an image? You know, so that's, for me, that's fun. You know, I mean, there's 10,000 ways we can go as artists, but the fact that this one has not been explored very much is interesting to me, and that's why I'm trying to go this way.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks.
All right.
Yeah, all of you. I wish I could ask all of you more questions, but thank you. Work is wonderful.
All right. Anybody else in our audience? Okay. I want to do one more question, but I want it to be really quick with all of you. See if you can answer this in one sentence. Reflecting back on your lives as artists, is there any one thing you'd want to advise someone who aspires to making art?
Artists, don't bow to fear. That's not what we do. So do what you want to do.
It's hard to make just one thing.
Yeah.
You know, you got to find your own interest and follow it. But there's just, you know, those are just words. I mean, when you start trying to get into the arts, you're going to look at different artists and say, okay, I could do stuff like that, and that's selling. And if you do, you'll always be behind the 8 ball instead of finding a way to make your own expression. But you know, I think for me, mentorship was my vehicle for becoming an artist. I didn't have an option to go to an art school. So, you know, if you're out in the boondocks someplace, you know, find a mentor, find somebody that's been doing this for 30 years and see if that helps you.
Great. Antoinette?
I would say, you know, be prepared for a lot of diligent work and keep flexibility with yourself, and allow yourself that self-doubt, but then overcome it.
All right. Micah?
Use art to awaken into the wonder.
All right. Well, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed having you all on this panel today. It's been wonderful to talk to accomplished artists who have thought about, you know, have experimented and struggled and failed and succeeded. It's really been a joy to talk to you all tonight, and can't thank you enough for joining us on this panel. Alyssa, any last words from you?
Thank you everybody for coming, and yeah.
Okay.
Well, I feel honored to be here with these other artists. They're quite inspiring. And thank you, David and Alyssa, for all you do.
Well, I have to tell you guys, it's a joy every single day coming to work and getting to see all the art in the Art of Wonder. And, you know, frankly, we say that about a lot of shows that we produce here, but it's been a really special experience for us to be in the building with all of you every single day and sharing it with the public. All right. Thank you again, everybody. And hope you come see the show if you haven't seen it, all those folks out in the audience. And we will stop recording and sign off for the evening. Good night, everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Blessings.
It was neat to meet you guys.
Yeah,
You
it really
too.
was.
Yeah.
What an honor.
It's funny because we passed in the opening, you know, for the most part, but I don't know enough about you to understand. You know, now I want to hang out.
Let's hang out. Let's meet up. Let's
Yeah, I
get
agree.
together.
Yeah, I look
Well,
forward
when
to
you decide to do that, let's do it at the museum. We'll have a little
absolutely.
wine and charcuterie and
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, let's make a plan.
All right.
All right,
Good night.
shutting things down. Thanks again, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good night.
As well.